Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
If you are a rural Alaskan resident with an interest in preserving subsistence hunting, trapping, and fishing for future generations, and maintaining an open forum for public expressions, opinions, and concerns regarding subsistence, consider applying for one of the Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Councils by Friday, January 29, 2016. More info at 1-800-478-1456 or email subsistence@fws.gov.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy. On the advisory chart here, we've got quite a bit of yellow areas here. This is winter weather advisories for the Kuskokwim Valley, all the way up to the Kobuk there, and then back across the Noatak Valley. That's for tonight and into tomorrow morning, in some up here into Sunday. For anywhere from 1 to 3 inches of snow through these areas, and then also winter weather advisories here for the southeastern Brooks Range for 2 to 4 inches of snow. And again, that's for tonight and into tomorrow. And also for St. Lawrence Island here, winter weather advisory for snow, some blowing snow there, and also back up toward the Bering Strait. And that's out for just this evening. Otherwise, we've got the high wind warnings still going there for the Alaska Range west of the Tok Cutoff for wind gusts of 70 miles per hour tonight, mostly through the higher elevation passes there. And also for the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country zone, there's high wind warnings out there for gusts of 50 miles an hour tonight. And then for the upper Yukon Valley here, Yukon Flats, surrounding uplands, a wind advisory is out there for tonight for southwest winds to 45 miles per hour. Otherwise, on down to the south, still have that small stream flood advisory still going, actually now through or into Monday for the Anchor River in Anchor Point. Moving on to yesterday's satellite imagery, we still had there was a pretty good storm winding up here south of the Alaska Peninsula, or south, yeah, and then the front pushing in across Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, moisture spreading northward and eastward throughout the day. And putting that into motion again, it was slowly tracking up across the peninsula overnight last night. And then this morning, started out right around Cape Newingham, the swirl in the clouds right in that area. And by this afternoon, that had slowly moved up to the northwest to just west of Bethel this afternoon with southeast winds gusting to about 40 miles an hour with snow there during the late afternoon hours. Today, the front right up in about this position here, still some moisture south to north flow, but becoming more showery along the North Gulf Coast, southern Alaska areas, with the main rain band pushing in toward the southeast coast there today with gale force winds here for like Clarence Strait and areas along the coast, with rain falling mostly over the central and northern areas there today, anywhere from a third to over half an inch of rain falling up in this area, with much lighter amounts down to the south, just a few hundreds falling in Prince of Wales Island. And then east of there, dry with that big high hanging there over British Columbia, but still the south to north flow, bringing the gusty winds in 45 miles an hour. Places like Seward, and pretty windy conditions across southern Alaska today. All areas, North Gulf Coast, Copper River Basin, all the way back out to the southwest to the Kuskokwim Mountain areas here. and a lot of shower activity as well, mostly in the form of snow over the Kuskokwim-Yukon deltas on up to the northeast, and a band of snow up here to the north down into St. Lawrence Island, extending back to the northwest along the western Arctic coast all the way to about Barrow. This low developing there on the eastern Arctic coast, bringing some areas of light snow there over the eastern North Slope and Brooks Range area, but these showers scattering out pretty good. Just some isolated rain and snow showers over the eastern Aleutians and widely scattered snow showers with light winds today across the Aleutians and most of the Bering Sea. For tonight, this low center will continue to move northward to the Seward Peninsula. And I've got another low here near the Pribilofs for some scattered rain and snow showers going on in that area. And again, snow showers or areas of snow here over the interior areas, mostly back to the west, drier conditions off to the east. Still got the gusty winds, enough gradient here along the Alaska Range. Pretty breezy here over the western interior as well, but lighter winds over the North Slope. And then this southeast wind flow, moisture continuing to come northward, so occasional light rain here from the North Gulf Coast to Kodiak Island tonight. Mixture of conditions here anywhere inland. And then that front now over the southeast coast really dissipating, and actually with a high building farther to the north. Offshore flow is going to start pulling that moisture back to the west and northwest. Just some lingering rain and snow showers over the northern panhandle with diminishing or rain changing to showers over the remainder of the area there. And then this next system there coming onto the chart, or at least the front coming onto the chart. Tomorrow that will lift northward, pretty good southeast flow ahead of that. So gusty winds, Kodiak Island, rain spreading across Bristol Bay again. And into the southwest interior, rain or snow or just plain snow up to the north there. And the old low there now southwest of Kivalina, keeping the occasional snow and fog, St. Lawrence Island, through the Bering Strait, western Seward Peninsula, seeing some light snow at times tomorrow, and then maybe another couple of inches falling on the southern slopes of mostly the western Brooks Range area. And then this band lifting northward off the Arctic coast there. So the North Slope, much of the Arctic coast looking pretty good with dry conditions. Variably cloudy skies here over the eastern interior to just outright clear from Eagle all the way down to McCarthy. Yakutat looking pretty good, and some lingering moisture still along the coastal areas, but definitely a drier day here with lighter winds for the southeast coast. Some areas seeing some clearing as well, say from Annette to Petersburg, Wrangell, up toward Juneau and Haines, looking pretty good. For Monday, we'll see that whole system slides northwestward, a low forms and pulls up into the well, barely the northern Bering Sea there northwest of the Pribilofs, keeping the showers going and the cooler northwest winds coming back around, keeping the snow levels at sea level from about Atka all the way out to Shimia and northward. Mixture of rain and snow showers for the eastern Aleutian areas. And then another system that lifting northward to the Alaska Peninsula, so pretty good winds here with that front elongated from St. Lawrence Island southwestward right across Fognak Island and onto the southeast. So a lot of moisture coming back into the North Gulf Coast here, mostly from Prince William Sound westward and across Kodiak Island. Possible rain heavy at times, especially the heaviest rain will probably be on the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula areas. Chance of moisture in northern Cook Inlet, mainly over the western inlet areas to the Alaska Range, but pretty fair, mostly clear skies up over the northern and northeast interior areas, and variable high clouds, so pretty dry day. Maybe a little breezy, but not too bad there for the Tanana Valley. Down into the Copper River Basin, variable high clouds, but basically dry. Mostly sunny from Cordova all the way down across all of the southeast coast. Looking pretty good on Monday with generally light winds, although gale force winds in the forecast there from the north for northern Lynn Canal. Temperatures this afternoon across the Panhandle are in the upper 30s to mid 40s. At 3 o'clock, 43 in Sitka, Klawock, and Annette, as well as Wrangell. Otherwise, 37 at Juneau, 42 in Yakutat, upper 30s here for the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, South Central Alaska, but Homer up to 41. That same temperature matched also at Kodiak and AKwx here with 32 over at Gulkana, 36 in the Susitna Valley at Talkeetna, 6 degrees at Northway, but up to 39 with winds gusting 45 to 50 miles an hour at Delta. Otherwise back down to 22 at Fairbanks. Healy had 38. and a 24 at Tanana. Fort Yukon, 30 degrees this afternoon with 21, both at Anaktuvik and Arctic Village. Otherwise, 10 to 15 for the North Slope and the Arctic coastal areas. A little cooler here on the west side. Mid to upper 20s over the northwest, and the Seward Peninsula, mostly the lower 30s there. 32 in McGrath to 37 at Bethel, with mid to upper 20s out along the coast. And 14 degrees at Savunga, and north winds at 40 miles an hour at Tin City with snow, and 15. For the Pribilofs, mid-30s there today, upper 30s to lower 40s for the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay, and then conditions cooling out to the west down to 28 with some snow showers at Shimia. For the lows tonight, mid-20s out in that area, otherwise upper 20s, lower 30s for the Aleutians and the Pribilofs. 30s here, Bristol Bay and the Peninsula. Mid to upper 20s or just high 20s here over the southwest interior. Mid 20s for the Seward Peninsula in toward Kotzebue Sound, pretty mild. And lower 30s here over southern Alaska, mid 30s for Kodiak Island, in the 30s for the Panhandle. Coolest areas again, Tok Northway, right around 0 to a little below, and maybe the North Slope dropping off a little bit towards 0 as well. Highs for tomorrow, a little milder there. Teens here for the Arctic coast, up 9 at Barrow. And again, that southerly flow keeping it in the lower 40s here over the Bristol Bay area and the Alaska Peninsula, but temperatures rising above freezing all the way up to about Deering there, with lower 30s in across Kotzebue Sound. Otherwise, teens, 20s, and lower 30s over the eastern interior. For flying weather, pretty good VFR along the southeast coast, all the way into western Prince William Sound, or eastern Prince William Sound. Western Prince William Sound will see some lower conditions. IFR, again, that southeast flow, keeping it low there on the Pacific side of the peninsula. Also some IFR here over the southwest interior, specifically near the Auckland and Kilbrook Mountains. IFR possible there along the western Seward Peninsula and the southern slopes of the western Alaska Range. Areas of marginal VFR out over the Bering Sea, and to a lesser extent the Aleutians. Passes Anaktuvik, marginal VFR tomorrow. Adigan, though, marginal becoming VFR into the afternoon, with Lake Clark and Merrill, occasional marginal conditions for both those passes, as well as rainy. Let's see, there we go. Rainy, marginal VFR. And for the the Alaska Range, windy VFR, Isabel VFR. Although windy, could see some marginal VFR on the southern approach. Isabel, marginal VFR becoming VFR. And for Mentasta, looking good. Tanita also has VFR in the forecast. Portage, IFR on the eastern approach, otherwise marginal at times. Chilkoot and White, good VFR. Freezing levels at the surface here from about Kiska Island to Nunivak Island, eastward across southern Alaska, with the 2,000-foot freezing level in over the southern panhandle there, or into the central areas, down to about 4,000 to 5,000 feet toward Dixon Entrance. And icing 4,000 to 14,000 feet. The elevations, you may find some light to isolated moderate rime or mixed icing, mostly in the rime type, spreading northward into the southwest interior, definitely across the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay, and maybe to a lesser extent on up to the north. Upper level wind flow chart, jet stream, strong jet stream across the Pacific, takes a turn to the north here at about 155 west, so any moisture systems developing down in this area will be coming northward and northwestward. As you can see, the 9,000-foot winds, 45 to 65 knot winds coming across Kodiak Island into Bristol Bay, diminishing to about 25 there. Higher pressure over the eastern interior, especially the Copper River Basin. Pretty light winds for the Panhandle as well. Northwest 15 to 20 for the central Aleutians, and at 3,000 feet, more easterly in the direction here, 40 to 50 knots across the southern Gulf of Alaska and across Kodiak Island, 55 knots into the Aleutian Range, then back around 25 to 40 knots up here over the northwest and across the Brooks Range. Pretty light for the Panhandle areas. Northwest again 10 to 20 out over the Aleutians. As far as turbulence goes, occasional moderate chop there along the Brooks Range and also over the southwest interior, Bristol Bay, all of the Alaska Peninsula, probably Kodiak Island as well. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Winter. Cold, wet, and deadly. Every year, snowstorms strand hundreds of people in their cars, isolate thousands in their homes, and kill those who are unprepared. In this film, you will see and hear true stories about 6 people caught in severe winter weather and isolated from help. Ed and Paul Maluski were going to their cabin to button it up for the winter when it began to snow.
The storm hit about halfway up the mountain. By the time we got about a mile from our cabin, we kept getting stuck every 10 feet.
We were always out digging, which got us wet. Then the snow got real heavy, and you couldn't see 5 feet in front of you. It was pretty clear the Bronco wasn't going to make it, so we figured we'd walk to a neighbor's cabin. It wasn't real far, and we know that area like the back of our hands.
The funny thing is, everything changes at night. And with the blizzard, well, you couldn't tell which way you were going. I thought I knew, but boy, I just couldn't tell for sure.
Dad! Leave us back here! We don't need it! There's food in the cabin!
You know, it was funny. I'd be thinking real clear for a while, and then just didn't know what I was doing or where I was going. I couldn't even remember Paul's name. My own boy, and I couldn't remember his name.
I got worried wading through that snow. Dad was really beat. He could barely keep up. I started thinking about things I'd never thought about before. I fell and dropped our flashlight and didn't pick it up right away like you normally would. I knew we were getting delirious then. Then we hit that gate. Well, it's nowhere near the cabin.
We've gone too far! Let's go back to the Bronco!
Paul, we can't go back. We wouldn't make it. I wouldn't make it. We've got to find that cabin or we can't make it. Now, come on, we've got to find that cabin.
From then on, I just kept thinking, you gotta keep going. You gotta keep pushing.
I saw that cabin and said one long prayer. I could hardly believe we finally found it. We walked for 2.5 hours and it was less than a half mile from the Bronco. All I could think was, we had to get inside. We finally got in. And then we didn't say anything at all. We didn't talk.
Ed and Paul had become victims of hypothermia, a physical condition caused by a person's body losing more heat than it produces. The result? A dangerously low body temperature. When Ed and Paul were outside, the conditions were perfect for hypothermia to set in. It was cold, and they were tired and wet. First, their bodies tried to generate more heat to combat the cold. They began to shiver. It was a losing battle. The constant exposure to cold, wet weather defeated this first line of their body's defense. Then, in order to keep the remaining heat concentrated in the body core, the brain, heart, and lungs, their bodies began to cut down blood circulation to their arms and legs. This gave their vital organs a fighting chance to continue functioning. But it also caused the loss of muscle control in their hands, legs, and arms. As their natural defenses gradually began to break down, they became more confused and disoriented. If they had not found the cabin, the cold would have defeated all their body's defenses, and they would have died. In this kind of emergency, the first thing to do is get out of the cold. Then, carefully begin rewarming the body. The most important areas to rewarm first are those areas nearest the body core, the sides of the chest, the neck, the groin, and the head. These are the areas of highest heat loss and highest heat absorption. Warming these areas first lets the body build back and hold its heat, starting with the body core and gradually spreading to the rest of the body. Ed and Paul did not rewarm themselves correctly. They began by warming their hands and feet, and that could have killed them. Warming the body's extremities first forces cold blood to flow back to the body core. The result is usually death. Paul went to bed that night shivering uncontrollably because his body had not been rewarmed properly. Both men needed medical assistance desperately. It's a miracle they survived. Part of the miracle was the cabin they broke into. It was owned by a man who believed in being prepared for anything.
Once we got warmed up, we found plenty of wood for the fire. Besides, there was a propane tank to heat the cabin too.
There was plenty of food, enough to last us a couple of weeks. And you could eat it right out of the can. You didn't need a stove to cook it on.
Nothing. Well, they know we're gone. Yeah, they should.
Candles, flashlights, lanterns, all were on hand with plenty of batteries and fuel to keep them working. Ed and Paul even found a battery-powered radio. It was a relief to hear that rescuers were out looking for them. The cabin had a well-stocked first aid kit, too. Ed and Paul were stranded way up in the mountains, far from any help. But even in a city, snowstorms can be dangerous, especially for the elderly. The elderly can fall victim to hypothermia even at home. It's essential for them to maintain warm room temperatures of 68 degrees Fahrenheit or more. Continued exposure to low room temperatures can easily cause older people to become hypothermic, and it is very difficult to detect.
Your turn now.
They usually don't shiver as hypothermia takes hold, but their breathing may become shallow and their heartbeat may slow down. Either of these symptoms during cold weather means medical help is needed immediately. The best cure, of course, for anyone is prevention. Stay warm all the time, eat well and regularly, and keep physically fit. These factors will help protect you from winter cold.
Did you get back to the clinic this morning? Good.
Welcome back. Small craft advisories out along the coast for winds mostly southeast here on the south coast, more easterly up to the north. Northerlies 25 knots, Lynn Canal, and kind of a variable wind condition at 15 over the central and southern inside waters. Then for Monday, southeast winds at about 20 knots here along the coast with seas running about 13 feet. 25-knot winds on the north coast. Gales coming back into the picture for northern Lynn Canal out of the north, and even small craft advisories here for Stevens Passage, but much lighter winds and still southeast for Clarence Strait. For the North Gulf Coast, east 30 knots tomorrow, east about 20 for Prince William Sound. Southern Cook Inlet, small craft advisories, and we've got some gales out of the east there for Kamishak Bay, southeasterly gales there for Kodiak Island. And the outlook for Monday, gale force easterlies here for the North Gulf Coast, right across the Barren Islands on into Kamishak Bay. Small craft advisories for all of Cook Inlet, northeasterlies 25 to 30 knots. East 30 for Shelikof Strait, southeast 30 there for the east side of Kodiak. And for the, say from Sitkinak to Castle Cape, southeast 40 knots tomorrow. Otherwise, Bristol Bay easterlies at about 30 knots. Small craft advisories for the peninsula. For Monday, still looking at small craft advisories here, northeast 25 for the Alaska Peninsula, east 30 for Bristol Bay, southeast 30 from Sitkinak to Castle Cape. And for the western and central Aleutians, well, actually the entire Aleutian chain will be northwest, pretty light, 15 knots or 10 to 15 knots, except up to 20 here for the Fox Islands. And then looking ahead to Monday, a little more westerly, staying light here west of Adak, but we get into the small craft advisories from the central Aleutians here, westerlies, mostly westerlies, 25 to 30 knots all the way to the east with seas running 10 to 15 feet. And for the southwest coast, southeast winds at 20 tomorrow, northeast 25 for St. Lawrence Island. Pretty light winds for the Pribilofs and about 20 knots there for St. Matthew Island. And then for Monday, northwest kicking up to 25 knots there for the Pribilofs. Easterlies 20 to 25 knots on the southwest coastal areas right through here. And east 25 brisk wind advisories for St. Lawrence Island, north 20 for the northern Bering Sea. For the eastern Arctic coast, kind of a variable wind condition here, 10 to 20 knots. And then from the central coast on down to Cape Thompson, northeast at 20 knots. And then more northerly there on down to Wales. Then for Monday, much lighter winds, easterlies at about 20 here will be the strongest there from Wales up to Cape Thompson. And then all of the Arctic coast there, easterlies at 10 knots, maybe up to 15 knots here on the east side. For tonight again, rain changing to showers and tapering off here over the Panhandle as that front weakens and actually begins to pull back to the west. Moisture with this system, more rain, Kodiak Island, stays damp along the North Gulf Coast. This low pulling northward will take most of the moisture with it, probably mostly in the form of snow, whatever's left over here, definitely up to the north where winter weather advisories are out. And the high wind warning continues for the Alaska Range tonight. And then high pressure over the Northwest Territories here makes for a pretty good day here over the eastern interior. Just some leftover moisture along the Alaska Range and also for Prince William Sound, the Kenai Peninsula. Rain though, Kodiak Island up over the southwest interior with gusty winds. And then for Monday, that first low kind of develops and pulls back to the northwest. The other one comes up toward the peninsula. So again, pretty gusty winds and rain, possibly heavy at times in advance of that front into the southern Kenai Peninsula, but dry, mostly clear for the Panhandle on up into the northern interior areas. Well, that's a look at the weather for tonight. Thanks again for joining us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.